Letting everybody in here. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to another New to VC session. The one ask I would make is that while I'm having a conversation with Matt and Nisha, that if you are not Matt and Nisha or myself, if you can stay off the video so we can keep them focused. And then we'll bring you guys up for questions, or if anybody has a comment. Feel free to make aggressive use of the little hand raise feature as we go along, and the chat room as well. And we'll go from there, and we'll try and bring in as much audience commentary and questioning as possible. But in the meantime, as I just shared with Matt and Nisha, this is actually my excuse to brain suck them for as much as they know about generating good deal flow, because they both have worked for really great firms and really great portfolios. And I want to know more about how I should be generating good deal flow. And so the fact that there happens to be an audience here is just kind of an excuse for me to get their best practices. So just by way of introductions, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Charlie O'Donnell from Brooklyn Bridge Ventures. Brooklyn Bridge Ventures is a solo general partnership, and I've been doing investments in and around New York for almost 20 years, actually. Good Lord. And
you started when you were 11?
Thank you. I've shaved off most of the grays. So I lead or co-lead, mostly seed, pre-seed, being a part of the first, call it $1 million or more that a company might raise, taking very active positions in a wide range of different types of companies, consumer, B2B, whatever you are working on in and around the New York City area that you think has a venture return. No conversation is too early. And I'll let them give their own intros. Nisha, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Hey, everyone. Nice to, shortly see you all. And Charlie, thanks for having me. So my name's Nisha Dua. I run a fund called BBG Ventures. We're an early stage fund focusing on leading or co-leading at pre-seed and seed. We are well known as one of the first funds to back companies with at least one female founder. What we're really excited about is where we think consumer behavior is going. And so when we first launched our fund in 2014, it was really around this insight that we felt that founders who might understand the dominant consumer, women, were actually not being backed as the drivers of innovation for that audience. And that's why we launched with this mandate. And as we've evolved through the last 8 years, though we've kept that mandate, as we think about the future, that has really become, we've moved from the pro forma white male consumer, no offense to my panelists, to acknowledging women as the dominant consumer, and now really being in a place where we say actually identity and lived experience are bigger drivers than they ever have been before. And the quintessential American consumer looks a lot different than it once did, and new brands and institutions and frameworks will be built for that, particularly given that under 18s are for the first time that the generation that will be majority minority, and so the country is really heading in a different direction. So actually about 70% of the founders or companies in our most recent fund have a founder of color on the team, and they're going after big problems that are must-solve problems for these groups of people. So we spend a lot of time in health and well-being, future of work, a little time in climate and fintech and products and platforms for overlooked consumers.
Cool, thanks. And Matt?
Hello, everyone. I'm a partner at FirstMark. So FirstMark is a New York native early stage firm. We do seed and Series A. We have in many ways that classic venture model, which was certainly not cool to talk about 6 months ago, but suddenly seems to be more in favor, which is that, hey, we're concentrated. We don't make too many new investments a year, but every investment is a big deal. We tend to be lead investors. We tend to take board seats, which is not about the board seat itself, but more about the commitment to the company that it signals. And we are long-term investors, as cliched as it may sound. We come in again at the Series A, but we stay with the company all the way to the exit, to the IPO, sometimes way past the IPO. And that's the model. We're very hands-on. We have a whole platform team that helps with introductions, talent recruiting, and all the things. So, in the ever-shifting landscape of venture, that's where we sit, sort of that core lead investor. By design, we do both consumer and enterprise. So every firm likes to brag about their better-known investments on our end. The list includes Pinterest, which was a very formative investment for the firm. Really helped put us on the map. So a little bit to that model that I was describing, we came in literally at the first money in the company, not just the first angel money, the first money. When it was tote. What's that?
When it was tote.
Exactly, and when he was in New York, which not many people know, and then stay on with the company, not just to the IPO, but like way past the IPO and exited, thankfully at the top at the 45 billion market cap. So that was an important investment for the firm. We came in at the series at Shopify as well, and there's thankfully a long list of great companies we work with, like Airbnb, Discord, DraftKings. So on and so forth. We currently have something like 29 unicorns in the portfolio for what it's worth. I'm one of the 5 partners, and I focus more on cloud, data, machine learning, and AI, and I do a little bit of crypto and Web3 infrastructure type investment. So that's us, and that's me.
So one question I have, just for context, you've got a lot of folks in the audience who are thinking about or have applied to VC jobs. And so I want to understand, like, if I were to take a job at either one of your firms, does the deal flow just start happening? Like, does the deal flow just come to the firm? And it's the sort of brand of the firm that's generating this, or are you guys individually driving your own deal flow?
Can I go first?
Nisha, are you getting BBG deal flow, or is it specifically to you?
That is a great question. I would say that has evolved for us over time. So I think certainly at the beginning, the deal flow was coming to me and Susan individually, and even more to my partner at the beginning, because she was a more well-known entity in the ecosystem. I had to build my own brand up. I think now we're sort of 8 years in, we have an established brand. We actually get a lot of inbound. I won't say that all inbound is high quality deal flow that is venture backable, but we do get much more proactive outreach because we've established a name for ourselves of backing female founders. And I think it can be a self-fulfilling sort of cycle for the juniors on the investment team, which is, they come in, we push down some of the deal flow that we're getting to them. Very quickly, they start to meet founders, and people associate them with BBG. And so they start getting an influx of what you might describe as BBG deal flow, and then they build an individual brand off that. And I think that's very much been sort of the evolution for us. But I would say it never stops. And as individuals, particularly as the ecosystem is changing, and we can talk about the noise in the ecosystem today, I think it behooves us to be continuing to build those individual deal flow channels, regardless of a brand or a platform.
Gotcha. So Matt, are you still building your channel, or can you at this point, after your 22 unicorns, just kind of sit back and catch the FirstMark deal flow?
29.
29.
No, look, so I mean, joke aside, I mean, just to jump to the sort of the conclusion, I think that if you are Sequoia, or maybe like maybe like another 2 or 3 firms that have been around for decades, and like everybody knows, like, you know, if you're one of the firms that like anybody that knows anything about VC knows, then you can afford to not build a personal brand as an investor. If you are not in one of those 2 or 3 firms, you absolutely must build a brand. And we can talk about what that means, because it's easy to get turned off by the concept of personal brand building. I mean, just saying the words like gives me, you know, the shivers. But you have to be known for something, and that has all sorts of consequences that we can talk about. The separate part of the discussion, which is a discussion itself, so like the concept of deal flow. You know, deal flow used to be, there used to be a time in the history of venture where venture was, you know, you sat in a very comfortable office somewhere on Centennial Road, like not anywhere too far from Centennial Road, and you did have that big brand behind you, and deal flow came, and you picked and chose the companies that you like best. Like that world is probably 20 years ago, you know, 25 years ago. That's completely changed. And deal flow now has become, you know, something that is much more proactively built, and we can talk about what that means. But you know, long story short, you need to do the work individually.
And how much of your time, and do you think about it this way, do you spend trying to source? And then what, like for you, Matt, what are those activities? I mean, do you measure at any given week and sit here and say, well, I feel like I'm not seeing anything, or I'm seeing too much? And then do you like have periods where you go out and try and generate more? And what does that look like?
Yeah, so maybe you know, at the beginning of this conversation, it makes sense to talk about what deal flow is, and Nisha alluded to this with the word quality, right? So there's deal flow, which is seeing a lot of deals, and then it's like the kind of deal flow that you want as an investor, which is a related but, you know, different concept. So the deal flow is you want to see not just a lot of deals, but the right deals, first thing. 2, you want to see the deals at the right time, which often means that you actually see them before they are deals. And then you want to see the deals in the right conditions, which typically means that one way or another, you're sort of already on the short list of the founders and whoever has backed them in the past as one of the most desirable investors, right? So that's the goal of what deal flow really is. It's very easy in this job to get lost, to run around, you know, like headless chicken again and again, go to like all the conferences and the dinners, and you know, being super busy, but like ultimately not very productive. And that's you know, the wrong type of deal flow. And like every investor goes through the same phases when you start the job, whether you are an associate that's in charge of like sourcing and generating deal flow, or whether you're like a new partner and you need to build your own franchise. Like everybody goes through the cycle of like, you know, going in all sorts of different directions. And again, like feeling like they're super busy and like talking to a lot of entrepreneurs. And like to some extent, you have to do that because that helps you, you know, define what you want to do. That helps you create a benchmark of, you know, what good or great looks like. So that, but that needs to be a phase. And like at some point, you need to ultimately be a lot more precise in what you do in general, but like in terms of like deal flow in particular. So I mean, I have a set of activities that I can talk about. I don't know if you want me to talk about.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll go into that in a minute, but I want to follow up with Nisha about something that you said, and that's the sort of feeling busy, but not necessarily, you know, feeling like you're seeing what you want to be seeing. And Nisha, I'm sure that when you started the firm and started your career, you probably felt the need to sort of be everywhere, talk to everybody, and perhaps, pared that down and focused yourself a little bit. What was that process like? Are there things that you look at now, and obviously the last couple of years have been sort of a weird time, but did you say like better or worse uses of your time as you have built up your network and activity level?
I mean, I think Matt alluded to something which is, you know, a part of the learning curve, which is I think when you're first out there, you have to create a map for what is good, what is a good company. And so, typically you do find yourself, I think, taking, nearly every meeting, and you'll qualify that in some ways, but half of that is learning. I think Matt also alluded to this, like what is the type of company I'm interested in and what is the type of founder that I'm interested in. And I would say, I actually think that's often something that comes maybe a little too late for a lot of investors. Like, what is the right company for me? But I think that is quite hard to define when you're just getting started out. I think what's happened as we've evolved as a firm is, and you talked, Charlie, a little bit about sort of like percentage of time spent, and I think it does ebb and flow as you get better at knowing those things, but you always have to have a pulse on, well, I'm not really seeing the companies that I want to be seeing, and why is that? And so I would say, like, have I had to be less out there? Probably in the middle of this journey, yes, because that sort of flywheel of founders, operators, and existing communities is sort of doing the job that it's meant to do, right? Like you invest in a few people, you've worked for a few companies, and they start sending you deal flow because they know that that's what your job is. But I think that can ebb and flow as well. And you'll sort of start to say, particularly for the people in this room who are evolving their investment theses, that actually as you're defining more of the arenas that you want to focus on, you may not be seeing the companies that you're looking for. And so then you'll start to get more tactical and say, okay, there are relationships I want to be proactively building at accelerators or pre-seed funds, depending on where you invest in the cycle. There are founders that I know I want to meet whose sphere I think I want to be in as I'm diversifying either my area of focus or the type of investor that I want to, or the founder that I want to invest in. And maybe you actually want to start thinking about what your inbound channels look like a little bit differently from a top of funnel or brand awareness perspective, if you really feel like you're missing out on kind of the deals that you should be in. And I think, so if I think about our deal flow sourcing, probably like 55% of our deal flow comes from founders we've either backed, founders we've passed on, or our former operating communities. What's increased over time is the deal flow that comes from like this very intentional time spent with accelerators and pre-seeds. What has driven some of our highest returning performers are two channels that I think, when you're getting into VC, you think I can just rely on my network, and actually the gems can really be found when you're being proactive. So our investment in Spring Health, which is based in New York City, it's a B2B mental health company. I was developing a thesis around precision medicine and opportunities in mental health, and I actually read about Spring Health and sort of their approach and went out seeking an introduction and did a bunch of back channeling to get that. Similarly, our investment in Julia Collins' company, Planet Forward, I will lightly use this word, stalked Julia for, basically about 5 years. Like I heard about her when she did Zoom and Google Ventures backed it. And I was like, this is a woman we need to know as a fund that is backing the best female founders. And so finally I saw her speaking on a panel, and I went up to her and I introduced myself, and we developed this relationship where we would bump into each other at the wing. And ultimately we ended up leading her round for her new company. And we can talk about networking and deal sourcing at another time and what that means. But my final note is, I think for us as a fund, and this is not true of most VC funds, but inbound has been a really surprising source of deal flow. So, two of our highest performers actually came via Hello at BBG Ventures. And I think that has a lot to do with our thesis as a fund to back founders who have just not found VC appetite before because of their profile. So we've sort of been trying to develop a system to make that more time efficient. I'm aware that I didn't answer your question on time spent sourcing, Charlie. So I think perhaps the takeaway from both Matt and I is that it feels like an always on sort of process, but there's not, but I think that percentage ebbs and flows pretty, from month to month.
I'd be curious if the networking and the targeted networking ever becomes a on the margin deal consideration, at least early on in your as you're building a portfolio, where you start to think, well, I would like to do deals with this particular group, or I would like to do deals from this accelerator, and over time I will get good deals. I mean, I remember back when I was at First Round Capital, we definitely felt like, for example, Y Combinator was a place that good deals will come out of. But even in particular batches where we were like, not sure if we're excited as we normally would be, but as a deal flow channel, we didn't want to get shut out. So there were probably a couple companies on the margin, some of whom actually wound up performing really well, that we probably did because we wanted to maintain the connection, and thought about our generating a portfolio that in itself develops a network. Do you think about, co-investing with certain people to get their deal flow?
I will say, I think there have been a few occasions where we have done a deal because we wanted to be associated with a certain person. I would say those deals have almost always turned out to be the wrong idea. That motivation in and of itself is wrong. And I think that's an important learning curve that many investors will go up. I think to your point on intentional networking, is where that motivation is about, that's a high quality founder that I want to get to know, or a high quality relationship I want to build. I think that has proven out really well, like the Julia Collins example. And I think the point on Julia is, like, we were very keenly aware in Fund 1 and 2 that actually our diversity metrics, despite the fact that we backed women, were not that great. We had a lot of tall blonde women, which is what my partner is, and we had a lot of short Asian women, which is what I am. So like bias, pattern matching bias exists everywhere. And so we said, let's be intentional about building new warm nodes in our network. And Julia, as a knock-on effect of investing in her, has been a great source of high quality, diverse deal flow. So I think where it's about sort of like the unique qualifications of that person, and you continue to invest for the right reasons versus investing to be associated, that at least has been the demarcation for us.
Well, and I think you bring up something that isn't obvious to people who are not sort of on the inside. A lot of times it is very tempting to want to invest with a certain firm. But the reality is, unless you are also a board member of that company, that firm probably doesn't even know you exist. I mean, you're somewhere on the cap table, but if you're like a tiny angel or just doing sort of a follow-on, like the amount of time you're actually going to FaceTime you're going to get, you're not really as collaborative other than a very limited number of people who are maybe just board members or just sort of intensely focused on a company. And the founders network is something that you're going to get a lot more than you'll get your co-investors networks. So I want to talk for a moment about developing a thesis. Because Nisha, you talked about getting inbound, but also seeking certain types of things. Matt, FirstMark's done a lot of work around data, cloud-related stuff. You developed communities around it. How much of the deals that you've done come from looking in a particular space and finding the thing that you're looking for? I guess I'd say three categories, right? Finding the thing that you're looking for, or looking in a particular space, and because people know that you're looking in that space, come to you. And then the last bucket being random inbound, and despite your research and all of that sort of stuff, you've got lots of good deals that just like didn't come out of that sort of active effort.
Yeah, so look, to me, that's super essential. I mean, there's different ways of being a great venture investor for sure, but just like speaking from just my personal experience, that's super essential to have a thesis, to have an area where you spend a disproportionate amount of time. Doesn't need to be all you do. You can certainly have like a major and a minor, and you can look at stuff at the periphery. But at least if you're like me, ultimately mostly a Series A investor, and again, like sort of like low volume, high conviction type investor, you have to specialize in today's world. And there's multiple reasons for that. A lot that has to do with basically enabling compounding effects to happen, where everything you do within that category tends to be self sort of reinforcing and makes you an increasingly better investor and also better board member. And so you become, if you specialize, ultimately you get to a stage where you have better deal flow, you're better at picking within the deal flow, and then you become a better investor after you invest, either as a board member or as somebody that's close to the company. You can actually add value, the famous adding value, because you actually have spent a lot of time in the space. So like at a minimum, you really understand the industry, the dynamics, the competitors, the products, and all the things. So like I'm a big believer in specializing somewhat. And that's again in contrast to what I was saying at the beginning, which is like, okay, you can spend like hours, months, years just like running around, and like you never quite something in the space, and like you do one deal and then like another sort of like random deal, and then like there's no compounding between those two, because like one of them is whatever, like a SaaS, and the other thing is like a commerce company, and the last thing is a crypto thing. Like your reputation doesn't compound, your knowledge doesn't compound, and then your deal flow is not going to compound because like people are going to be, okay, well, is Matt a crypto investor, like a D2C commerce investor, or like a SaaS investor, right? So if you reduce the aperture, it actually opens up opportunities in a way that's somewhat counterintuitive. Now, from a deal flow perspective, like all the activities that you alluded to, Charlie, have been extraordinarily instrumental and productive for me. So just to for anyone to put some more color around that. So I fairly specialized again in like sort of cloud, data infrastructure, machine learning, and AI, all of which is actually very much part of the same kind of like broad tailwind kind of like phenomenon. And so I actively invest in the space, and there's like a number of different companies that will be again like self related in one way or another. So like what I learn on one board becomes directly applicable to the next board. Then I, for what it's worth, I blog about the space, tweet about the space, and then write painfully long annual sort of deep dives into the industry. And I do one of those like industry charts where you have lots of little logos on like I've been doing this.
Lumascape.
Yes, exactly. For data, so like I call it the mad landscape for machine learning, AI, and data. And I've been doing this for like 10 years now, which in some ways is a highly masochistic exercise. But in other ways, it's sort of in that little world. Again, because I picked a space that's sort of become the reference document. And, I know of like a number of people that have blown up the chart and I put it on their wall. And that's, at startups, that's, some my investor friends, some, global 2000 type companies. And one of the beauties of doing this is that there's like hundreds of companies in the chart. That means there's hundreds of companies that want to talk to me, because I've done this for 10 years. It's become the reference document that people put on their wall. And therefore, it's become important for companies to be on it. And whoever is not on it or not in the right category is going to want to talk to me. And I find myself, obviously, I'm not going to be able to talk to 600 companies. I'm not a professional analyst. This is like more like a side thing. So like I find myself in the position of like saying no to a lot of people, which is not by design, but like sort of like create that tension where like people want more of my time than I can provide, which is a good place to be in general, right? Where there's like demand for like math, like instead of like, okay, nobody knows math, nobody cares about math. Actually, I really want to get in front of math, right? So that's the second part of the strategy. And the third one is this community called Datadriven NYC, which effectively is started as a little meetup, again, like 10-ish years ago. That was something I started on a whim on a Sunday night. Thought I wanted to do like a round table of some sort. Went on like meetup.com and just like created a group there. Couldn't come up with a name. I think I ended up calling it the New York Data Business Meetup. Like very strong branding. Right there. And like I thought I had access to a room. I was at BBG Ventures at the time. I had access to a room, and I figured it'd be like fun to have like a like a round table type thing, like a handful of friends around the table to like geek out about data. And at that first event, I ended up having 30 people. I thought I was going to have 10 at 30. And then, second or third event, I thought I was going to have 30 people. I had 90. And then within 6 months, I had 200. And then within like 8-9 months, I couldn't fit everybody in the larger room I got at Bloomberg. And the whole thing like started snowballing from there. And fast forward to now, it's become a 20,000-ish person community. We've somehow managed to survive through COVID by doing Zoom events and all the things. But the point of the story being that it's proven to be a remarkable source of deal flow and something that has enabled me to win deals that sometimes or even be allowed on the cap table in situations where I like no business being allowed on that cap table because I was trying to get in or competing with the very best firms in the world, and I was just like this random French guy who lives in New York, and like I this firm that like people had sort of started hearing about a little bit, but that was certainly not again like Sequoia or whoever. And this is like the power of, again, specialization, community. By now at that event, I've had 375 speakers who are like all the top CEOs and CTOs in the space, like a bunch of like heads of like AI at like, Facebook and Pinterest and Airbnb and so on and so forth. Some researchers, some academics. So like I've put myself at the center of this community. Again, that happened. That was not by design. I did this on a whim and just had fun doing it. But the key message for people who are starting in this world or thinking about what they want to do or how they want to do it is that this really, really works. So the activity of like publishing, or creating events or creating communities and all the things that you can think of as part of sourcing, that's absolutely worth the time and effort. And by the way, it's a lot of time and a lot of effort. And as you know, Charlie, it never really gets easier or better. But I would highly recommend something like this. And then we can talk about what that is, because like at this stage, a lot of those communities have been created, a lot of the blogs have been done. So like you need to have like your own twist, and we can talk about this, but highly recommended, very instrumental to generate deal flow, and then also win and also become a better partner to the companies in which you invest.
And one quick comment I'll make about that, because it's sort of like that saying, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, second best time is now. There are many people who look at something like the data-driven meetup and say, well, you've got 20,000 people, who's going to go to my tiny little meetup, and all of that sort of stuff. And there's plenty of people writing blogs, and there was less sort of at the time. But one comment I'll make to encourage folks is that the last 2 years have been really disruptive to in-person communities. And so I actually think there's a fantastic opportunity, particularly in New York, going forward, because if you think about all of the kind of regulars who used to show up to things in and around New York in person sort of before 2020, that group is over 2 years old now, and hasn't gotten together in a while. And especially in any really big city, you've had a lot of churn. You've had a lot of folks that have moved out of the city. And then you have maybe an even bigger number of new people taking advantage of maybe a temporary respite in rents and that kind of window, coming to New York for the first time, who aren't connected, who had never been to a data-driven meetup in person, and don't necessarily know that type of stuff exists. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to gather people together over the next, kind of year or two, because, and the other thing about the meetup scene is that it does take a lot of time and effort, and people's own personal life situation changes. So there were a lot of meetups that were sort of popular for 3, 4, 5 years. And then, somebody takes a new job or has a kid or whatever, and they just can't maintain that same level. And it does create an opportunity for new folks.
I think that's an extraordinary important point and super encouraging for folks. We literally just like this morning, 4 hours ago, scheduled our first in-person Datadriven NYC, just internally, like we were just like locked in a date, which is gonna be June 6th. And it was sort of freaking out. It's like, like how many people are actually going to show up at this thing? It's like starting again. And yes, we have a big distribution list, but I don't know. I'm kind of nervous. We'll see.
I'll put it in my newsletter. It'll be fine.
Thank you.
Nisha, so I want to talk about for a moment. Look, you guys have the benefit of a firm paying you to do these activities for a living, right? And a lot of the folks who maybe are on this call or starting out building their career are paid to do other stuff, and this is their sort of side thing, or angels who are maybe running a company or doing something else. As you are doing these types of activities, getting out there, how are people getting on your radar to either help generating ideas or to somehow see deal flow that you are working on? Because there's somebody out there who, thinks of themselves as being the next sort of associate at BBG, but wants to sort of build a relationship. And you're busy doing a bunch of stuff. So how do people form a relationship with you for that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, because you sort of said like we're being paid, a firm is paying us to do this. And I think to some degree, that's true, but for a very long time, we had a very lean budget, and we sort of viewed all this like building that we're talking about as, it's part of the job, it's part of your day-to-day hustle versus some of these bigger firms that have money to spend on that. And so I think, if I'm to relate that to your question, at the core of this, and exactly what Matt has described and what I think you've done so well, Charlie, is it's all about building a community around you that says something about who you are and what you want to invest in. And so when I came into this to back female founders, I built this platform called Built by Girls. And so it was pretty clear that I was interested in what young women are doing and what they're thinking about for the future. But I would say, like, the people who stand out as it relates to deal flow and who come to us are people who've cultivated some interesting or unique community. That can be in an interest area, as I think like Matt has described pretty well. It can also be with a type of founders. So I still remember, like, one of the best candidates we looked at for our last associate role was this young guy who had worked at a prior fund, and we were jamming on sort of like companies he thought were really interesting. And as one of the very few funds backing female founders only in the city, we at that point had pretty much knew everyone like on the radar. And he was constantly mentioning these new companies or these people I hadn't heard of. And I was like, okay, how are you doing this? And he had, of his own accord, decided to host a weekly breakfast with new founders who were standing up their idea and trying to tell their story, and just offered himself as like the help for challenges they were facing. And I think he started off with, let me help you with your deck. And it was just like a weekly breakfast that he threw, and he did this. And so as a result, he actually had this like extraordinary set of early stage deal flow of really top-notch founders. And so I think that's an example of, you have to say, like, what is both my interest and what is my value? And in this case, he had said, my value is I'm really good at helping people tell their stories and kind of the early tactical stuff of getting a company pitch off the ground. And that was his niche. And I think now we're seeing, a lot more folks, building communities around, okay, call it like women in Web3. And that can be a really unique angle for, sort of this differentiated deal flow, right? Like, what is the community you own and that is authentic to you? And is there evidence that you're out and about actually building that community? And can you share something that's differentiated? And I think that the people who get us most excited to co-invest with, or maybe one day hire, are the people who stay in touch about those communities and the people who have an opinion about the opportunities coming out of those communities. So I think one of the mistakes that younger investors or people trying to crack into investing make is that they get very transactional about this. I know some investors who send like, here's a list of the deals I'm looking at this month, and there's like 4 companies listed in them, and you get like no color or understanding of why they're picking this company to send to you. Now, Charlie, you send me often a very targeted email about why I might like a company, but there are a lot of investors we've talked to and we've been thinking about hiring, or who've made a great case, who are really thoughtful about, this is why I've found this company, this is the opinion I have on this arena because I've been spending time in it. That's the stuff that kind of stands out to us. And I think this is sort of like the untouched conversation of deal flow, which is really about network, which is networking shouldn't be transactional. Networking, building deal flow should be about building relationships. It should be about an exchange of information. And then underneath that, the mechanism is stay top of mind, so you're in the kind of the right place at the right time.
So we're talking a lot about communities and activities, and there's probably some introverted person in the audience thinking like, this sounds exhausting. Do both of you guys consider yourselves extroverts? And how do you, so Nisha, you're a strong no there. So how do you deal with this constant, putting yourself out there, attending things and all of this sort of stuff? Because it does feel to the outside, and Matt, I am going to come back to the personal brand discussion. It many people have a visceral reaction to this type of thing, and I'm just curious how each of you deals with the parts of it that somebody who is not introverted would struggle with.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think there's like there's an overarching sort of strategic answer to that, and then there's a tactical answer. I'll start with the tactical answer, which is like there is an overabundance of events, and so my view on all these events that you attend is if you go there and you have one great conversation, that was a meaningful outcome, and you're allowed to go home, right? You're allowed to be as sort of tactical as it relates to any of these activities as you want. I think the overarching answer is a funky word that I think is like kind of overused and a bit gooey, which is authenticity. And so you have to approach all of these things in a, what is authentic to me and my energy? So what are the events, places, platforms that I should show up that make sense to me? Some people are really great at tweeting. Matt is excellent at tweeting. Like Matt's brand of humor on Twitter is like,
that's a good Twitter follow.
Right? Like one of my favorite things to read. That's a great place for him.
I will just drop my Twitter in the chat.
Yeah, I'm really good at creating memes on Instagram. And I realized that actually there are a lot of female founders who spend more time on Instagram than Twitter. So I was like, well, actually, maybe I'll spend time building our following there. And so I think like figuring out where you want to invest your energy, and then going back to this idea of I'm here to like share what I know and learn from other people, that makes this a little less exhausting.
So Nisha, you mentioned Matt's Twitter, but do you know about his secret dance move TikTok that he is really, there's an account.
If Matt is the first over 40-year-old white male to go viral on VC TikTok, I will be extraordinarily impressed.
Matt, do you consider yourself a extroverted person?
This is my TikTok influencing move. Like you're supposed to see bubbles. Oh, can get it. Do I consider myself extroverted? No, not at all. I think I like sort of like fall in the middle of square in the middle between like being introverted sometimes, being extroverted in other times. But like very much to Nisha's point, I mean, there's different ways of doing those things, and I think ultimately you want to do you. And you want to do something that feels natural and fun for you to do, and then you want to double down on that. I don't think if you really hate going to events, if you truly hate going to the events to the point that you're like sort of paralyzed and I just like hate every second of it, there's actually it isn't a job where you're gonna need to be at some event. So actually, I'll venture the thought that it may or may not be the right job for you. I mean, just frankly. Having said that, you may be okay with going to some events, but like ultimately that's not really your thing. You can counterbalance that by doing other things. So if you're much more the introverted, sort of like deep analytics or analysis type person, then just write a blog, write a newsletter, write like whatever tweets, or like do something that comes naturally to you. And then interestingly, you'll find that if you write consistently interesting stuff, over time you'll have the right kind of people gravitate around whatever you wrote. So there's just different ways of doing it.
I'll offer a couple of things about event stuff, and then I want to talk a little bit about vetting quality. So I really like small groups, and I also really like food. And so for years, 8 or 9 plus years now, I've hosted dinners. And not being from a big fund, I'm not in a position to pay for everybody's dinner. And so Brooklyn Bridge Ventures hosts shared dinners where everybody splits the cost of the dinner and the host eats for free. And we have it in people's apartments. And we've been doing that for like 9 years. And it's we bring in a chef. The food is fantastic. The company is really great. And what I realize is that I've talked to more people across those 10-person dinners than I would have ever talked to going to a big event, right? Because at the same time, there's only so many people that you can talk to and have a kind of a real conversation. And the social half-life of a dinner, the remembering that you went to a dinner with somebody, you shared a dinner. I look at my deal flow stream now and I get so many emails that start off with, hey, I don't know if you remember, but I came to the Tribeca dinner 7 years ago and here's who went. And like, I genuinely remember that dinner and remember that, the 2 guys who showed up wearing the same shirt and, all of that kind of thing. And so I'm really big into figuring out a format that works and then figuring out how to kind of repeat it. And it doesn't necessarily have to be meet everyone. It could just be sort of meet small groups, meet in sort of a kind of focused way. On the flip side, I probably take less one-on-one meetings than the average person who is doing deals at my stage. So I would rather meet in a group of folks that I kind of want to talk to, but not necessarily want to drill down on, than necessarily take 8 back-to-back half-hour calls and which I might find draining. So I know myself, I'm like better in that kind of group dynamic. Okay, so you're doing all these activities, you're putting yourself out there, kind of getting a bunch of inbound. What are the signals that you guys look for to make sense of the deal flow that you're getting, both in terms of to get a sense of like, is this good quality deal flow? And how do you figure out where to spend the most time on the deal flow that comes through? So for example, do you respond to everything? And what is your bar for actually like taking a meeting? Let's just maybe focus on those 2 things. So Matt, if I cold email you, are you going to respond?
I do occasionally, not as much as I would like. So the flip side of doing all the aforementioned activities is that you do get like an enormous amount of just email and also a lot of like LinkedIn messages. By the way, like I don't know who needs to hear this, but like don't message people on LinkedIn, like investors, like nobody actually looks at those. And like
it literally says that in my LinkedIn bio and people continue.
Yeah.
Oh my God, except that I did about a month ago and it was a founder I'd passed on and she introduced me to a founder and I just led their deal. So like sometimes, yeah.
Wow. So I only realized like maybe 3 months ago, last time I went to check. So I'm on LinkedIn regularly, just like as a publishing platform or, to like whatever, connect with people, meaning the invite function. But I never checked my messages and I went into it like 3 months ago. And then I realized that it was a thing now that like people introduce each other on LinkedIn, and there's literally been people that have been like talking to one another in my inbox for months, and I feel terrible about it because like I'm not trying to be like a dick about it, but like, it's sort of like the level of like noise to signal in LinkedIn is so overwhelmingly high that you don't it doesn't make sense for people to use that for investors to use that as a channel. But so to answer your question, Charlie, so like the first part, which is very important, which is like deal flow. A lot of what I do, I end up doing, especially in the last couple of years, I end up doing proactively. So it's more me doing the work, finding companies I'm interested in, and reaching out to them. So that's a big caveat, right? So maybe as the market changes,
which is a little bit of a function of stage, I would imagine.
A little bit of a function of stage, and very much a function of the market we've been in, and how just crazy competitive it was for the more sort of like obvious opportunities. So as the market shifts, as it seems to be shifting, maybe we'll be more in sort of like inbound mode as opposed to outbound. But like the last couple of years in particular, I was very much outbound for the stuff I was like truly interested in. And then like all the activities I mentioned became like a reason for people to take my call, as opposed to a broad sort of marketing umbrella that generated inbound towards me. So it's like a little bit of a different paradigm. Now, in terms of like the stuff that's inbound, again, like the benefit of being somewhat specialized, it's pretty clear what is immediately interesting and what is immediately less interesting if you spend enough time in your areas of choice. So whether you're a healthcare person or a crypto infrastructure person or an enterprise software person, as long as you do the reps, like at some point you're like, okay, well, this is literally the 27th company in data quality that I'm seeing, and I'm looking at this founder who basically doesn't have the right background. So not interesting, or that investor that I sort of met at an event maybe 4 years ago is sending me this deal, but I know that investor is not specialized in the space. I look at their portfolio and it's like all over the place, and like this happens to be like the one data quality company that they send me. I'm like, okay, well, not super interesting. So again, like once you're somewhat specialized, you're sort of attuned to certain signals. So you know what a great founder looks like. You don't want to be silly about it, but you have if they worked in a relevant company before, or if they have the right kind of like educational background, which doesn't necessarily mean went to the right school, but more did they study the right thing, that type of stuff is interesting. If the person that made the introduction is a specialist of that area, that's interesting. So you're very sensitive to those to the signal. The space, who's good, what great looks like.
So Nisha, I'll ask this question, but specifically to some of the things that you were talking about optimizing for and diversifying your deal flow stream. And you had mentioned to me that you guys have done quite a fair number of deals outside of the traditional geographies. And so you're getting deals that, maybe don't come from the same kinds of networks that you're used to seeing. What kind of screens are you then using if you're sort of trying to be a little more open?
Yeah. So I think, listen, I'd echo largely what Matt said, which is as you start focusing on arenas, you can pick what's interesting and what's not more clearly. And I think that's happened for us as a fund. We went from being more generalist to sort of having these focus buckets. But I will say the kind of three things, and let's call it actually two things. One is about the founder and one is about the opportunity that we're really trying to get a sense of is, does this founder, and this is the type of founder that excites us, have both lived and learned experience? So are they going after a pain point that they've really observed or experienced, or are they looking for a TAM on a spreadsheet? The former excites us. So we're trying to get some sense of that. And then from the learned experience, does their mix of not big company logo experience, but does their mix of professional experiences make them uniquely qualified to solve this problem? And then, as we think about this sort of what I described earlier about this move from monoculture to polyculture, are they trying to go after some big broken system that is affecting these large groups of underserved people? So I think we start there, and that has become over time an effective kind of gating tool for us, because you can imagine When you say you're backing a company with at least one female founder, literally every deal that has a woman on the team, whether it's venture backable or not, gets sent to you. So I think that is also about, that's not just reps, it's about refinement of your own thesis. And I think that's fairly obvious. I think like one of the things we try and sort of like I use as an extra tool is, how well does this person tell the story in their first communication? Whether that's in like 2-3 sentences or it's in their deck, preferably in the deck. And we can have a whole separate conversation about founders who don't like to send a deck when they reach out to investors. But is this person a good storyteller? Have they been able to communicate what this opportunity is, why it's exciting, why they're the right person to do it in their short bit of outreach? And I think that can be quite telling as you track through a diligence process. I think if folks aren't that great at that at the outset, they may never really be great at it. And there is something to, I mean, I don't, like, Matt's in a pretty technical area, right, compared with us, but I think there's something to be said for the person who can take a complex concept or opportunity and really whittle it down to the big opportunity and why this, why them. That can be a really effective sort of gating function too, when you're just getting emails or even Twitter DMs or LinkedIn's.
So,
can I put some blog post in the chat?
Yeah, sure.
It's truly obnoxious. All right. So
Yeah,
like I could not agree more with what Nisha just said. So like I wrote this, but like clarity of thought, which indeed is for like a venture capitalist, like you sort of you described it perfectly. And then to the earlier thing about building a portfolio of activities, like many years ago I wrote this, but it's still 100% valid, I think.
So in the interest of just generating deal flow, I don't have a particularly relevant blog post, but I'll just throw my blog in the chat too, just because, this is all about generating the flow. So, Nish, you want to?
And I'll just keep sitting here and saying smart things, and then you guys can write the blog post, and then I can just leverage those.
You got a
when I need to make
Substack
my
to pitch,
point.
or
Yeah.
Too late.
Actually, I will say, like, you shouldn't be afraid of my Instagram, Matt. Do the BBG Ventures Instagram. I will say, like, I think one thing that has been left out of this conversation is this can be an extraordinarily collaborative ecosystem when you're starting out in particular. When I started, I mean, Charlie was one of my best sources of deal flow. And we're in a number of deals together and in a number of great deals. So I think like a lot of times people can feel like this is a really competitive ecosystem, when in actual fact, and it does get more competitive at the Series A. It is a more competitive market right now, but just remember, like, a deal that's right for you may be really right for someone else, or there may be an opportunity to co-invest together. So don't underestimate your peers as good sources of deal flow. And to my sort of joke about these guys blogging, I mean, I literally sent an email to my founders today about market conditions. And I was like, I'm sure you're hearing about this right now. In fact, here are 2 example posts of how to think about the current market. And who did I link to? Charlie O'Donnell and Matt Turk. Because like sometimes why rewrite the wheel? So it's okay not to brand everything individually to our point on authenticity. Like, pull from the people you like to work with and they'll respect that you reference them too, right? Like, relationship building is again at the heart of all of this.
Now I owed Nisha another deal because we have that deal going where every time she links to me, I'm supposed to send her another company. So I gotta,
It's my affiliate model.
There you go. Before I let you guys go, I want to make sure if anybody in the audience has a question, feel free to use the hand raise feature and we'll get to you. But in terms of staying on the radar of other investors and collaborating, that was actually sort of going to be my next question. How do you spend time with other investors, and do you intentionally, I mean, do do the, hey, what are you looking at, deal review kind of things with folks? And then, how many people are you doing with? Do you find, what are sort of the most productive ways to stay on other investors' radars? So Nisha, how do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think this relates a little bit to the comment I made about transactions earlier. I think at the outset, I probably tried to set up these like regular touch bases. I would say like there's nothing like a catch up with an investor that's something that can be knocked off the calendar, right? Like the ability for those to stay on the calendar is actually pretty rare. And so, what I try and do is actually have like small groups or nodes in my network. So like, who are the people in San Francisco I always need to check in with when I'm out there, and kind of actually like save that for my regular visits. I have a regular breakfast with 3 or 4 female VCs monthly. And so this is again really about trying to move relationships into sharing deal flow, because I think once you're more regularly in contact with people and you're staying top of mind, that is a better function for like real live deal flow. But I think it is good to be intentional about it. We think a lot about who are the Series A investors we want to follow on in our companies. It's not just about the first part of the funnel, but the second part. And so I think a good way into building those new relationships is to think about, what does this investor I want to get to know want from me? So I have ended up building relationships with maybe some investors that I wouldn't have otherwise met, because they're like, hey, we really need to diversify our deal flow. And so just think about like what you can offer to someone else as well if you're trying to build a new relationship.
Matt, do you spend much time with other VCs?
I do, but again, because while we do seed and Series A, I on the whole personally do more Series A than seed. Like I sit one step further down into the kind of like the assembly line of venture. So a good part of my deal flow comes from other firms. So yes, I do spend time with VCs, and by the way, I also spend time with VCs that are in the next stage of the assembly line, because part of my short-term success as an investor revolves around whether my companies get to do a great next round or great next few rounds. So it is important to be connected to the VC ecosystem.
Plus, the nice thing about that is the rule that the bigger fund pays.
Yes, exactly. Which, by the way, like I do systematically, and I know what I'm good at and why people want to have breakfast with me. So like I will pay for everything, but like I personally enjoy it. I think that's for all the snark, and I'm like prime culprit of snark about VC. I think I enjoy just like having relationship with all sorts of smart folks who have interesting ideas, and like on the whole are good people that are excited to be part of the ecosystem and building building great companies. So there's certainly the tactical one-on-one, again, because I'm specialized and I'm not boarding the ocean. There's a finite set of people that makes sense for me to spend more time with. Ultimately very few people, like I do this on a super regular basis because like I just don't have the time, but like I certainly do that. I will just add to the Twitter thing. So again, like easy to sort of like joke about Twitter, but I've found Twitter to be a wonderful way of not building but maintaining networks at scale. It's sort of silly, but like because like the whole venture ecosystem is on there. It's like amazing, like the power of a little like or reply to somebody's tweet, or like a retweet or whatever. Like we're all humans, and there's like a lot of people in the ecosystem, so like people will naturally like sort of forget about you. And then if you can, again, to Nisha's point, like authentically interact with them online, in a way that's like sort of like fun or sort of very natural, then like they'll have this spike where they'll be, oh yeah, I remember Matt, oh actually there was like that deal, yeah, why was he not on the list, like I should really reach out, right? And like forward that deal. And it's amazing how that works. And then the magic of Twitter is like you can be like sitting in your bedroom and have like that kind of interaction with like 20 people in 2 hours.
So I'll make the counter that I actually don't love meeting with other VCs and just VC group.
That explains it.
And so, but the way I try and maintain relationships with other VCs is I like putting other VCs in front of founders, which ultimately I actually don't think they want to hang out with me either. They want to meet more founders, and I'm just the middle guy. I'm just friction. And so I'm often inviting other VCs to opportunities to meet founders. So we do these like every second Friday, we do these Friday morning coffee meetups all around the city, and different VCs have been volunteering to sort of host in front of their like local coffee shops, or we do a one-day event, a full-day event where we have like a dozen VCs and a whole bunch of pre-Series A companies. And so at the end of the day, I just want to be associated with good deal flow. And I find that if somebody's experience of me was that time I invited them to a thing and they met somebody good there, that's going to be more memorable than like if we sit one-on-one for coffee and I run through the list of things that I'm looking at, some of which maybe they like, some of which they don't. So there's lots of different ways to do that. And I think ultimately people have to sort of find what it is that they feel most comfortable, sort of works for them. Well, listen, I understand that we're still in the middle of your workday, and I appreciate the time spent. Kind of a quiet group. I think a lot of these people are probably watching while they're at work. Oh, there's one last question here. Do you have a philosophy to how to approach Twitter versus creating a blog? I'm having trouble figuring out the difference. Is there a clear difference? Can Twitter be harmful? I think one quick comment I'll make about that is there are some people who certainly tweet as if they were blogging, and will write, at the point in which you break into double digits on a tweet thread, you are essentially blogging at that point. It's just kind of the medium, and I think they work together as well. People certainly share Medium posts and things that they write and sort of put out on Twitter. I think who and what you follow can certainly be harmful. There's definitely moments in the last year, probably less so going forward now, where you just felt like everybody else's company was doing super well and constantly getting marked up and raising all these big rounds and all of this sort of stuff. And now those same companies are, unfortunately maybe facing, layoffs or what have you. So it can be tough to follow because it's a really long game, and there's definitely a lot of FOMO going on. How do you guys feel about long firm versus short firm?
I mean, we view short form as kind of the best way to stay engaged with the community, and long form as essentially more of like a repository of our thoughts, so that if people want to know what we invest in, if LPs and founders alike, right, that's like our living, our database of here's what BBG is focused on. But Twitter is really sort of like our high velocity, Twitter or Instagram are our high velocity ways to stay in touch and engage. And I think from our perspective, and part of this has to do with energy, is that is a better place to spend our time with limited resources, because I think developing new audience for a blog is harder than it was. So the media platforms are just a better format for us when we think about top brand awareness and top of funnel.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Cool.
Twitter is nice, like training wheels for blogging as well. Like enables you like to try, ideas and like see what kind of like feedback you get. And it's like a high velocity feedback kind of mechanism, and it's sort of interesting from that perspective. And look, I mean, Twitter can be like super toxic and all those things if you talk about super controversial topics, or if you go into like politics and all the things. But this all those like niches of Twitter, which are really interesting. Like if you like me, you spend like time in like, it's not even named for it, but like data Twitter, like AI Twitter. On the whole, it's like a bunch of nerds talking to one another.
Very sexy Twitter niches.
Yeah, no, exactly. So like, it ends up being like, you're never gonna get like thousands of likes or retweets on that thing. It's like a different way. Like you find a little group and like you interact with people and like nobody cares. And by the way, like people take like Twitter way too seriously. The very liberating thing for me was to just allow myself to delete tweets, which I do all the time. So I tweet whatever goes through my mind. I never spend more than a few minutes thinking about a tweet. And you know what? Like I look at it like an hour later, and either nobody cared or some people cared, but I look at it, and I'm like, it's actually not that interesting or fun or whatever. I just like delete it. Nobody cares. Like it's just really nobody cares. So use it for what it's good at, which is like to try ideas, to connect with interesting people in your field, learn, and not as a sort of like audience building type thing, because there's no real point.
Gotcha. So Matt, oh, that did not break. That I'm lucky. The plate just fell off mine. Did you guys actually hear that or no?
No.
Ah.
That was just
favorite app. I'm a big crisp.ai user, and it filtered out the audio of the plate that just smashed against the floor. So that must have looked really weird when I just jumped for no reason. But
that's pretty cool, actually.
It's really neat. So Matt, when can we see you in person? When is the next Datadriven?
So it's on June 6th, and it's going to be at Lithion ADP, which is on 18th Street. And actually need to figure out how we're going to do that. But like, I would just, we'll probably just go back to the meetup thing. So like, if you go to meetup.com and search for Datadriven NYC and just like join the group, we'll just... Meetup is really one of those companies that's just like it's so hard to get off the platform. As like once you're there, it's like the worst registration platform in the world. But like just like the stickiness of having a bunch of people there that's insane. So anyway, meetup.com, search for Datadriven NYC, Monday, June 6th at 6 p.m.
Awesome, cool. Thank you guys for your time, and hope to see you both soon.
Thanks so much. This is great.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks.